You're alone again. Maybe it's a Friday night and everyone else seems to be somewhere. With someone. Doing something. Your phone is quiet. Your room feels smaller than usual. And somewhere deep in your chest, there's this ache you can't quite name. Not sadness exactly. Not depression. Just emptiness. Like you're standing outside a party, looking through the glass, wondering why the door never seems to open for you. And here's what makes it worse. You pray. You try to be faithful. You go to church, or you read your Bible, or you talk to God in the silence of your room. And yet the loneliness doesn't leave. So slowly, quietly, a dangerous thought starts to form. Maybe God is distant too. Maybe even He has forgotten me. Brother, I need you to stop right there. Because what you just felt, that moment, that ache, that silence, that is not evidence that God is far. It is actually the very place where He is closest. And today I'm going to show you why loneliness, the thing you've been running from, the thing that keeps you up at night, might be the most sacred space God has ever invited you into. Let's talk about what loneliness actually is, because most people misunderstand it completely. Psychology tells us that loneliness is not just about being physically alone. You can be surrounded by 100 people and feel completely invisible. You can have a full social life and still cry yourself to sleep. Research from the University of Chicago found that loneliness is fundamentally about perceived disconnection, the feeling that no one truly sees you, knows you, or understands you at the deepest level. And here is where it gets spiritually profound. That kind of loneliness, the deep kind, the soul-level kind, was never designed to be filled by another human being. C.S. Lewis once wrote that if we find in ourselves a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. Think about that. Your loneliness is not a flaw. It is a compass. It is pointing you towards something, towards someone, that this world was never meant to provide. But we don't treat it that way, do we? We treat loneliness like a problem to be solved. We scroll through social media trying to feel connected. We chase relationships, validation, approval. We stay busy so we don't have to sit in the silence. We numb it with entertainment, with noise, with anything that keeps us from feeling that hollow ache. And for a moment, it works. But then the night comes again. The silence comes again. And the ache is still there, maybe even deeper than before. Here's something nobody talks about. The loneliest people in history were also the closest to God. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness alone before God called him to lead a nation. 40 years. Not 40 days. 40 years of silence, of obscurity, of feeling forgotten. And it was in that wilderness where God shaped him into the man who would part the Red Sea. David, the man after God's own heart, spent years running alone in caves, hiding from enemies, betrayed by people he loved. And in those caves, he wrote the Psalms. Songs so raw and so honest that people are still reading them 3,000 years later, still weeping through them, still finding themselves in those words. That pain had a purpose. The prophet Elijah, after one of the greatest victories in all of Scripture, collapsed under a tree and said to God, "I have had enough, Lord. Take my life." He was burned out, isolated, deeply alone. And what did God do? He didn't lecture him. He didn't rebuke him. He sent an angel to bring him bread, to let him rest, to be gentle with him. Because God understands loneliness. He doesn't despise it. He meets you in it. And then there is Jesus, the Son of God, Emmanuel, God with us, and even he knew loneliness. In the Garden of Gethsemane, on the most important night in human history, he asked his closest friends to stay awake with him, and they fell asleep. He looked at the people he loved most and found no comfort. And in that moment, he cried out to his Father. Loneliness drove him deeper into prayer, not away from it. Do you understand what this means for you? Loneliness is not a sign that you are cursed. It is a pattern in the lives of the people God used most. But let's get psychological for a moment because this is important. There is a concept in psychology called solitude versus loneliness. They feel similar on the surface, but they are completely different in their effect. Loneliness is passive. It happens to you. You feel disconnected and helpless. Solitude is active. You choose stillness and you use it. Studies on mindfulness and contemplative practice consistently show that people who learn to sit in silence, to be present with themselves without distraction, develop stronger emotional regulation, deeper self-awareness, and a greater sense of meaning and purpose. In other words, the very thing you fear, the quiet, the alone, the stillness, is one of the most powerful environments for inner transformation that exists. But here's the key. It only transforms you if you bring God into it. If you sit in silence alone, it can become darkness. But if you sit in silence with God, it becomes a sanctuary. And this is the shift that changes everything. Stopping asking God to remove your loneliness. Start asking Him what He wants to say to you inside of it. Because God speaks in the quiet. He always has. Elijah didn't encounter God in the earthquake or the fire or the mighty wind. He encountered Him in what the Bible calls a still small voice, a gentle whisper. And you cannot hear a whisper in the middle of noise. You cannot hear a gentle voice when you are constantly filling every silence with distraction. Your loneliness has been creating space. And all this time, you've been trying to fill that space with everything except the one who placed that ache in you to begin with. Think about it this way. When a plant is cut off from sunlight, it doesn't grow sideways, it grows upward. It stretches toward the light. Loneliness is designed to make you grow upward, toward God, toward prayer, toward the kind of depth in your faith that only comes through seasons of silence and waiting. The people who have the most powerful prayer lives are not the ones who have the easiest lives. They are the ones who had no other option but to talk to God. The ones who got so desperate that prayer stopped being a religious habit and became an actual conversation. A real cry. A real surrender. Now I want to speak to the specific pain, because I know loneliness has layers. Some of you are lonely because you've been hurt. You trusted someone and they left. You opened up and you were rejected. And now you keep people at a distance because vulnerability feels like danger. The walls feel safer than the wounds. But hear this. God is not like the people who hurt you. His love is not conditional. His presence is not based on your performance. He is not going to leave when you become too much. You are never too much for God. Some of you are lonely because you are in a season of transition. You moved to a new city. You left a toxic environment. You walked away from people who were pulling you down. And now the space feels enormous, terrifying. But that space was not created by accident. God often separates His people before He elevates them. The space is preparation, not punishment. Some of you are lonely in a crowd. You smile at family dinners and laugh at the right moments, but inside you feel like a stranger, like no one in the room actually knows who you are. And that specific loneliness, the hidden kind, is perhaps the most painful. Because it comes with shame. The feeling that something must be wrong with you. Let me tell you something clearly. There is nothing wrong with you. You were made for depth, for real connection, for something more meaningful than surface-level existence. And that hunger is not a disorder, it is a calling. So what do? Here is the solution. Not a 5-step program. Not a self-help formula. But truth that can actually shift your experience if you are willing to receive it. First, stop running from the silence. The next time loneliness hits, instead of reaching for your phone or turning on a show, sit in it. Just for 5 minutes. Breathe. And say these words out loud or in your heart. God, I'm here. I'm listening. Because something shifts when you stop treating the silence like a problem and start treating it like an invitation. Second, turn your loneliness into prayer. David did it. Elijah did it. Jesus did it. Don't just feel the ache, speak it. Tell God exactly what you feel. He already knows, but there is power in the act of speaking it. God, I feel invisible. God, I feel forgotten. God, I don't understand why I'm here alone. That raw, honest prayer is not weak. It is one of the most powerful things you can do. Third, understand that this season has an expiration date. Loneliness in the life of a believer is never permanent unless you make it a home. It is a season, a chapter, not the whole story. Joseph was in the pit. Then he was in the palace. Moses was in the wilderness. Then he was on the mountain. Your current chapter is not your final chapter. Fourth, find community, but find it intentionally. Not just any people. People who are moving toward God, people who push you deeper in your faith, people who know how to sit in the serious conversations and not just the comfortable ones. If that doesn't exist in your life yet, ask God for it specifically. He answers prayers like that. And finally, this is the most important one. Let God redefine what connection means to you. Because the deepest hunger in you is not for a best friend or a relationship or a community group. It is for union with God Himself. Augustine said it this way, "Our heart is restless until it finds its rest in Thee." You were made for God, and every form of human connection, as beautiful as it is a reflection of that original longing. Loneliness is not your enemy. It is a doorway, and on the other side of that door is not just comfort. It is transformation. It is depth. It is the kind of faith that cannot be shaken because it was built in the silence, tested in the waiting, and strengthened in the surrender. The people closest to God are often the ones the world overlooks. The quiet ones, the ones sitting alone, the ones who had nowhere else to turn, and so they turned to Him completely. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. And the God who spoke the universe into existence, who knit you together in your mother's womb, who knows the number of hairs on your head, that God is with you right now, in the middle of your quiet room, in the middle of your empty Friday night, in the middle of the ache you couldn't name. He sees you. He knows you. And He is closer than you realize. If this message found you at the right time, write this in the comments. God, I trust you in the silence. Let that be your prayer today. And if this spoke to your heart, subscribe, because here we don't just make videos. We build people.